what is a seller's market versus what is a buyer's market, right? And what does that look like? So how do you guys explain that?
Yeah, that's good. I think for those of you that are newer to real estate or within the last 5 years, you don't know what a buyer's market is. I'm going to be honest with you. You don't. Mm-hmm. What a buyer's market is when we have 6 months of inventory that's neutral. So neutral 6 months. More than 6 months of inventory is a buyer's market, which the three of us have sold in a true buyer's market when there's more than 6 months of inventory, right? Mm-hmm. I saw a couple comments come in when we said we were going to talk about this topic, and I want to address a couple of those comments because they alluded to the fact that, oh, well, back in 2019 or 2018 or whatever, I was able to get my buyer into a home with 0 down and all they had to pay for was their inspections. That's great. We're going to probably see that again here in the next few months, but that's not the only indicator of what a buyer's market is. Right. A true buyer's market is more than 6 months of inventory. A neutral market is 6 months. Anything less than 6 months is what? Seller's market.
Oh, right. Well, and I think too, like, I'll be honest, like, I think that that's kind of statistical. Like, that's what they say, right? Mm-hmm. Is a buyer's versus a seller's market. I personally think, and I think you guys will agree with this too, I think in practice, like in actual practice, when there's like 4 to 5 months of inventory is really where it starts to feel more like a buyer's market. But Jamie, you're absolutely right. Like from a data perspective, 6 months is what they say.
Well, from a negotiation standpoint, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
But I know there was also what, Lauren?
I'm just kind of like practical like that. Like, who's calling the shots in this market, right? Like in this market, the sellers are calling the shots. They can basically say, this is what we want, and we'll go over and beyond to get that property. In a buyer's market, you're calling the shots. Yeah. You're like, hey, I want X, Y, and Z, and I want the fridge and the washer dryer, and I want you to clean I want all your furniture. I want all the things, right? And like in a buyer's market, you can get it. It's the complete opposite of what we've experienced over the past few years.
Right. So being able to explain that to your sellers, I think, is number one, right? Being able to explain, okay, so the market is shifting. It's not crashing. At least it's not crashing right now. I mean, we'll see what things look like in 6 months, but it's not crashing right now. So how do we start that conversation with the seller? So when we sit down at the kitchen table with the seller, like, what's the first question that we ask to them when they're like, okay, well, I think I might sell the house, but tell me what's going on. Like, my first question is always, what do you think is going on? Right? Tell me about what your opinion is of what's happening in the market right now, because that'll give you a good starting point.
That's number one. And then the other thing is, what do you realistically think you could sell your house for? I always ask that because I need to know where their head's at.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think is going on is going to help you understand, are they listening to the media? Mm-hmm. Are they only 30 days behind, or have they gone full Monty on the other side of the pendulum, and they're like, the sky is falling, my house is going to be worth 20% less next month than it is this month? Like, are they there, or are they kind of in that neutral position? Like, look, I understand it's slowing down. I keep hearing it's slowing down. My neighbor, they didn't get an offer on their first weekend, so I understand a little bit about what's going on, but then you tell me, because that way you know how to craft your conversation, right, with the seller. You know where to start and how much work you have to do to get them to the correct answer.
Right.
If you can get them to the correct answer, some of them.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, I almost put this in the group, but I didn't. I think it got squirrel. But anyway, if you haven't listed a house, especially in Charlotte, if you haven't listed a house in the past 6 weeks, you better check in with some of your listing agent friends. Mm-hmm. Because in the past 4 to 6 weeks, there's been a significant shift in activity. And if you're only listing one house every 6 months, your conversation is completely different, because you're basing this off of what the market was like 6 months ago, what activity was like. So before you go on those listing appointments, like, I highly recommend check in with people that have taken listings recently in a similar price point, and just ask them, hey, what kind of activity have you had? Like, what's your feedback been? because then you can set the right expectations for your seller instead of saying the wrong thing based on like 6 months ago, and then you're going to constantly be chasing it, and that's no fun. We've all been there.
Yeah, because what happens, Lauren, and I think you both of you went through this recently, where it's like, shoot, I went on the market and we didn't get maybe but one showing that week, that first weekend, right? And then your sellers are already freaking panicking on a Monday when they've only been on the market for 4 days, going, what the heck?
Yeah.
But we have to set those expectations, and I think the best way of doing it, we've talked about this before, Showing Time has great data. Showing Time will show you what to expect in terms of how many showings in that price point you're expected to be receiving.
Absolutely. And the data, your sellers cannot argue with data, right?
Right.
So if you pull the actual report, you can say all day long, oh, well, showings are down. Showings are down on my listings. You can say all those kinds of things all you want, but until you can show them, like once you can show them that report that actually puts it in writing in X's and O's or numbers or however you want to say it, right? Ones and zeros, like that's when the rubber hits the road for your sellers, right? And they're like, okay, like, she's not just saying this. And I think it's also really important too, when Lauren was saying to get with your colleagues, make sure that it is the same price point too, right? Because the market is acting very, very differently in different price points depending on your local market, right? So like here in Denver, for example, you know, I had a listing that we went under contract $50,000 over list price 2 weekends ago, where that same weekend I barely got 2 showings on $1 million house, right? So so make sure that you're operating in those smaller brackets, because that will make a huge difference for you. And you don't want to inadvertently underprice something or something like that on a lower end property, right? When maybe realistically you can still get multiple offers and be over ask price and all of that.
But that's where that data comes in, right? So if you're looking at Showing Time and the showings are actually up between 5 and 600, but they're down between 6 and 700, you might not want to list the property at 610 from experience. Right. Maybe you want to do 600 or 590 or something like that. Like it just isn't, when a market's shifting like that, you can't get like ahead of it, right? You almost have to be right under that threshold, so that you can continue to maintain some momentum. Because if you overprice or just even a little bit and the market continues to soften, you're just going to chase it, and your days on market are going to just continue to go up. And you're actually doing your sellers a disservice by trying to get them that extra 10, 15,000 right off the bat.
Absolutely.
It's hard too, because you said this last night when we were talking about this. It's like your seller wants X amount, and you're sitting here thinking that's 15, 20,000 over what you realistically should be listing it for. And then you're like, okay, fine, I'll go ahead and I'll list it 10,000 below what you're really wanting. But you're doing them a disservice. You just said it yourself. You have to show them the data, what's happening. It's not necessarily meaning that the market's crashing, but it is softening, meaning instead of having 30 showings, set that expectation that we're going to be lucky if we get 8 showings. Right? And if you price it completely wrong and try to push the envelope, you're going to just mess everything up for yourself.
Well, and if you can price it at the point where you're still getting those multiple offers, or at least a significant amount of interest that you can report back to the buyer's agents, you can still get top dollar. You absolutely still can. You just have to start at the right spot. Right. Well, and I tell my sellers too, I'm like, this is the thing, like right now we have to be spot on, right? Because if we're not, and your house is sitting on the market for a week or 2 weeks, buyers still somewhat have that in their head that's like, well, what's wrong with that house? Obviously, there must be something wrong with that house if it's on the market for this long, right? And so they're still completely eliminating, because they're still in the mindset that they've been in for the past 6 months of fight for all of the good listings, right? So there's a lot of questions about how to find the showings on the listing. So ladies, this is where you guys absolutely need to be resourceful, right? So go into Showing Time or whatever your showing services that you're using in your local market, and go to the help section and find out how to run those reports, how to find out. If you can't find it in the help section, call their 800 number, right? Find out how to run those reports. Ask somebody in your office how to run those reports, right? I know a lot of us operate off showing time, but not everybody does. And then above and beyond that, call the listing agents surrounding that listing you're about to take. Call them and just say, hey, I'm just calling to find out. I know this market is changing around a lot. When did you go on the market? How many showings did you have? How many offers did you have? How many, what was, just ask every single question that you possibly can think of, right? Because that will help you figure out too what's happening in that hyper local pinpoint neighborhood market.
Yep. Yeah. And that, again, it's just the more education you can give yourself, the more you have to report back to your seller, right? And it's going to help you do a better job. I literally just did that on a listing. Because it was on the market for 10 days, right? Which seems like an eternity. But I called the other agent and I'm like, hey, we both have a property that's still active in here. Like, what's going on? They're happy to talk to you about it. Most of the time, right? Because they want the same information. They just haven't thought outside the box to call you yet.
Or they feel like they're alone, right? Because not everybody's part of Girls with Grit. So not everybody understands that this is like a situation that's affecting everyone, right? So in their minds, they've got imposter syndrome and they're like, how is it that my listing is the only listing on the planet that's not getting showings right now? How is it that I'm not under contract? How is it that, what do I tell my sellers? Because they don't have a collaborative group like Girls with Grit in order to have those conversations. So they're happy to talk about it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, pick up the phone, girls. Sometimes it's, pick up the phone, text them, call. Don't irritate them, but sometimes just picking up the phone is going to do you good. I think a lot of us think, and I know I felt this way, especially when I was a newer agent. I was intimidated. I'm like, I don't know, what am I supposed to ask? How am I supposed to ask? Should I be asking this? Do I look dumb? Get over all of that and just say, hey, this is what's happening to my listing. Or if you're like, hey, I'm about to list something in this same neighborhood, just have those conversations. It's okay to not have the answers. It's okay to have, conversations with people. I think at the end of the day, that's what it is. You got to get out of your own head and go, okay, I don't know everything. The three of us, we still don't know everything. We've been doing this a long time, but it's all about trying to figure out answers. Being resourceful is the best tool that you'll have in your real estate career.
Yeah, that's what makes you a good agent. That kind of stuff. Being resourceful, putting your ego aside and being okay, like asking questions that you don't know the answer to 18 years in. Like that's what makes you a good real estate agent.